Hello, I am Thad Calabrese, an associate professor at the Robert F. Wagner Graduate School of Public Service at New York University. In this video, I will discuss how much debt and borrowing is healthy for nonprofit organizations. First of all, what is borrowing and debt? Debt is when a lender agrees to provide a borrower with money. In exchange, the borrower repays the lender over time and also pays the lender interest for the use of the borrowed funds. So why do nonprofit organizations borrow money? Whenever an organization wishes to acquire some asset, such as a building or property, it must figure out how to raise the funds. A nonprofit might raise the funds from donors, but such appeals are time-consuming, cost money, and may not result in the needed funds. Therefore, borrowing becomes an important source of financing. One of the first questions a nonprofit needs to ask itself is, what specifically is the reason for debt? Purchasing a building or property, as alluded to before, is an appropriate reason to borrow money long term. Long term in this context means for more than 1 year. However, if the nonprofit is facing a cash flow shortfall for whatever reason, for example, it is owed money from a funder, then it should borrow short term, which means for less than 1 year. Borrowing to fund routine operations is never prudent and suggests a structural problem that the debt is unlikely to fix. The next logical question is, what type of debt should the nonprofit use? Short-term debt includes lines of credit and short-term notes, both of which might require collateral, but some may not. Long-term borrowing usually requires collateral, which simply refers to assets that the lender can acquire if the loan is not repaid. Common types of long-term borrowings include mortgages and bonds. Let's talk about bonds for a moment. These are large borrowings that are repaid over many years. Nonprofits may issue taxable and tax-exempt bonds. Taxable bonds may be used for any purpose that the nonprofit wants, and the investor pays income taxes on the interest he or she receives from the nonprofit borrower. Tax-exempt bonds must be used for core mission services. Investors pay no income taxes on the interest received from the nonprofit, so the interest cost on tax-exempt debt tends to be lower than that for taxable bonds. Therefore, if the debt is being used to finance core services of the nonprofit organization, and the size of the borrowing is substantial enough, managers may wish to investigate the use of tax-exempt debt by speaking to financial advisors. Frequently, tax-exempt debt is the least expensive debt financing available to nonprofit organizations. The final question to consider is, what are the consequences of too much or too little debt? Debt can provide money to the organization, but it also locks the nonprofit into repayment schedules that are non-negotiable after the fact. Missing these debt payments, which is called default, can result in lenders taking actions against the nonprofit to recoup their money. While debt is appropriate in some situations, nonprofits sometimes borrow unwisely to manage poor financial operations or to delay unpopular decisions, such as closing service lines. While we frequently contemplate the results of too much debt, the rigid cash payments that cannot be missed that can erode fiscal health, there are dangers to too little debt as well. Nonprofits might miss strategic opportunities, investments, or growth potential because of the fear of any debt. Overall, then, borrowing is an important consideration for nonprofits. They need to consider why they are borrowing, whether it is for the short or long term, and what is the least expensive borrowing that serves their needs. Thank you, and I hope this makes the topic of borrowing more understandable and useful for you.